Welcome to an international convention in insurance. Once again, we are here today with the insurance sector as fundamental actor in development of the country opens the debate on the topics economical and public policy that are relevant for our industry. This year, we have included in the academic agenda an analysis of Colombia in the geopolitical context, regional geopolitical context, as we just heard, the housing policies, challenges for the insurance companies, achievements, challenges of fiscal control, regulatory tendencies and supervision, and insurance in a segment dedicated to the innovation and new technologies that are so relevant in today. During these 3 days, we hope that together with the representatives of the government, the academia, and the insurance companies, to have the opportunity to analyze sustainability of this industry in the long term as all what it's given to our society. I would like to begin doing a revision of what has been the security insurance companies has affected our country and our region. What has to do with growth, with premiums. According to the numbers published by Sigma, up to 2018, the premium of global insurance were $5.2 million, with a growth of 1.5% last year and 1.8% average during the 10 years before. Clearly, it's a mature industry with no limitations of growth. The insurance represents 6.1% of the GDP in the world, and his consumption per capita was $682 per year. In Latin America, premium were $163 million, with a decrease in last year of 1.7% due to devaluation aspects of the monies in the region. Nevertheless, the average of the decade is a decade of growth around 5.2%. Related to the GDP, the numbers are 2.8% in GDP of the countries in the region. It's a less number compared to the rest of the world. Consumption per capita is $251. In the local aspect, the real growth average is 6.1% of the decade. In the last year was only 1.6%. The amount per production is 28 billion pesos, 1.8 times the amount of the last decade of 2009. The insurance, 45% of the total of the damages of the premium of the industry, of the people are 28%, and related to social security, where we incorporate labor risk, pensions, and provisional, 27%. More than half of the increase of the premium during the last decade is concentrated in life, work risk, SOAT, and automobiles. It's important to consider that only, not considering automobiles, the others have a component of mandatory insurance that shows the challenge that the insurance companies have to keep on growing in the industry that are not regulated, that do not have that mandatory regulation. If the indicator of penetration reduced last year from 2.88 to 79, in many years in Colombia, this indicator is the same as in Latin America. We have recovered part of that gap we've had with the region. It's still, obviously, a low indicator compared to the rest of the world. In the technical reserves, investment, and patrimony of our industry net worth, today the industry accumulates reserve of 60 billion pesos, which converts into one of the most important investors in the country, generator of opportunities and growth through the good use of these investments. There's also a portfolio of investment associated to this reserve of 69 billion pesos that duplicates the amount corresponding to this same number 10 years ago. This dynamic, in good measure, induced by the business of pension, vital rents, and this ratifies the vocation as in our industry. The net worth grows, very importantly, 14.3 billion pesos, 43% more than the last decade. In accidents, in the period 2018, we had a growth in payment of accident of 7.3%. During the last year, paid more than 14 billion pesos in our industry. This that has to do as a summary with numbers, but looking forward, we have an industry that faces some challenges, a conjunction of challenges that possibly have the most important challenge for our industry. These challenges do not come from just one aspect. They're not exclusively for a catastrophe or the lack of any player in the industry, but it's a conjunction of different factors that are present in this moment, this very particular moment of our industry. It's said that here in 10 years is going to be different, in 10 years on, and it's going to be unrecognizable because a lot of changes that we are faced with. I would like to mention these events that are affecting our industry in a very important aspect. First of all, the most important one would be the eruption of new technologies and the change of the behavior of the consumer. That is clearly our line in the new industry of the insurance companies. On the other hand, a reduction in the growth of the world that, hand in hand with high availability of capital on low costs, makes these competence aspects of the industry is going to be exacerbated. Also, the catastrophic risk of natural causes and the entrance of new participants in our industry, some of them that have the partners of the traditional industry and others from other aspects or other sources of business, will be new competitors. In respect to the technology and to the changes in the behavior of the consumer, obviously the investments in technology are not new for the industry. This is an industry that has been doing investments that are very important in technology. But nevertheless, we had not been able to capitalize the huge opportunities that we have with the digital world, a world where there is information nowadays much broader compared to the ones we had before, and capacities, computational capacities, to be able to offer better services to our clients. Other countries have been more successful in the use of that information, as the case of La Banca. What makes us think that for the insurance companies, we will have opportunities of development. We have challenges. Some of them have to do with the moral risk and the good management of risk that are so needed in our industry, that make so difficult the use of new technologies, even though I'm pretty sure that with time the technologies of information will solve those challenges ahead. On the side of the consumer, we have a consumer that is much more demanding, that has tried superior services from other industries, from technological industries, and also from the financial industry. This leads us to think that these expectations from our consumers will be very demanding for the industry, and we will have to approach these problems. If we don't do it, it's going to be a third party who's going to offer those services, and our clients were going to leave and work with them.
We believe that regarding some technological topic is something the industry has been working on, but there's still a long way to go. It is worth recalling that in this same Congress last year, the financial superintendent invited insurance companies in order for us to be more proactive in the use of more technologies. We are all working in these technologies, but most likely we still have a long way to go. Regarding new players in the market, we do see an important transformation in distribution channels. The digital ones create some challenges that are also in this conversion process for the insurance as well as the insurance intermediation world. Those that are starting to provide similar services to those of insurance companies, they're all welcome. The more opportunities the customer has to choose from different products, different service alternatives, the better it is. We believe that these new players should do it within a balanced regulatory framework in which those important criteria for consumer protection of reserves should go beyond the specific rules of insurance companies, and it should be applicable to those offering similar products to ours. Along these lines, we believe it is convenient for the consumer to have new alternatives, but to have them within that balanced regulatory framework. Another factor that will have an important incidence in our industry are catastrophic risks, the effects of climate change, the concentrations in large cities. Because of these exposures are much higher, and obviously we have to manage this in a prudent manner, as we have been doing up to now. In addition to these factors that are external to our industry, we have our own issues regarding a regulatory framework that should be modernized in order to be at the level of the international ones. And we have two trends that we are envisioning as the two main challenges for the industry from the regulatory standpoint, and they have to do with the adoption of the solvency framework and the risk-based solvency framework and the Rule 17 that sets forth a new accounting framework for insurance company with important effects in the calculation of the industry's reserves. Here, it is worth underscoring experiences that we have had jointly between the industry and the government, topics that in the past the Ministry of Finance as well as the Superintendency and the Trade Association have worked hand in hand to improve the regulatory frameworks, mainly the reserve system that regulates our activity today. That was the result of a joint work in which the standard with which we have been working on in the industry was improved. We believe that's the path to follow, and it's a pleasure to work together with the superintendency and the ministry so that in the new solvency framework and in the regulatory accounting rules, we would all follow the path to implement these rules so we can be part of the international scenario from the regulatory standpoint, taking into account the specificities of our industry, the cost, and the necessary efforts in order to achieve those implementations. Implementations that should be done gradually based on what's happening in the world. If we think about the NIFA 17 and the new accounting standard, they are still being analyzed in international fora regarding the details of its implementation. On the other hand, another topic that we consider of paramount importance is the one that has to do with mandatory insurance. And they show an important factor in the industry. One is mandatory service mandatory service for traffic accidents and labor ones. We understand that they are both mandatory insurance because the market presents some inefficiencies that make it necessary for the insurance to be mandatory in order to avoid for some market participants not to take the insurance, transferring the cost to society in an inconvenient manner. And they come with regulated fees, and because of this, we can lose the market reference, which is so positive. That loss of market reference requires from us, insurance company, and from the government and the superintendency, a joint work in order to keep those conditions in order for these insurances to have the performance to comply with its social objective, which is so important. The benefits of the SOAT of this type of insurance has been very important regarding the lives that have been saved and the payments that have been made in many cases of people that had traffic accidents and also labor risk. The capacity the industry has had to improve the quality of life of the country's workers with indicators that show this in a positive manner. Likewise, we support the increase in productivity of the companies that have taken care of those cases and have worked on prevention. We believe that it is very important to protect that social role of mandatory services that they have been covering in the two fronts that I mentioned previously.
We trust that we can be able to work with the national government, legislature, superintendents, and obviously us as part of the industry. There are a very important factor that is going to be a topic of discussion on Friday. It has to do with the judicial insecurity that this affects our industry. Particularly, there are failures that don't know the contracts of insurance, or where artificially are going to be much more costly. That makes it the industry has to be very careful in the way they develop our business, and it's limited in the commitment in meeting its social object, that's to accompany the development in projects of infrastructure as a daily basis of the companies and the families that are part of our country.
As to this front, we really trust that joint work with the national government, with the control agencies, with the Congress of the Republic and the judges, in order to provide transparency to the application of those rules related to the insurance agreement, in order to have that judicial security that is so important for the growth of our industry. We see all this framed within a clear role that should be played by the insurance industry in terms of supporting the country's growth. We feel that our role in that front is necessary because we produce certainties that enable for the different actors of society to actively participate with investment in projects that allow or enable the growth of the country. President Duque has mentioned the importance of having growth rates in the countries above 5%. Hopefully, we could have aspirations of rates of 7%, which is the factor that could have a higher impact in the country's development from here on. I think that as an insurance sector, we play a very important role because we give rise to a space of trust that will enable the country to have a more aggressive investment and will result in a growth rate of around 7%, will help to take from poverty those Colombians that are still in high poverty levels. That includes that high percentage of Colombians that are part of the informal sector and do not enjoy the conditions that are offered by the system. as those that are part of the formal economy, we believe it is convenient to emphasize some initiatives that have been recently presented regarding labor reforms that make more flexible the regulation in that area that will enable to include other populations in this insurance scheme that has offered so many benefits to those Colombians that are part of this system. Hoping for the industry to solve in an expedite manner its concerns and that we can comply with that social purpose of achieving a higher growth for the country. And having said this, I would like to welcome you to the 2019 International Insurance Convention, aiming at building a better future for all of us. Thank you very much.